Pornography addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder. You don't just need to quit porn. You actually need a new life altogether. It is in large part something that shoots straight to the base of your brainstem. In the year 2000, the rates of erectile dysfunction under the age of 35 were 0%. By 2011, it rose to 30%. You are looking at a mass psychological experiment on an entire population without their consent.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Austen Summers Podcast, the mind-expanding podcast to get you the girls that you want. And today I am joined with porn recovery coach Nate O'Neill. And why don't you start by telling people who you are and what you do, just very briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. So at a high level, I'm an aerospace engineer turned pornography addiction recovery coach. And at a very high level, I help people quit pornography, heal trauma and the emotional roots that drive the problem, create healthy relationships, and connect with a higher sense of purpose. Spent the last 3 years coaching people, launched a mentorship program last year that has now helped dozens of people around the world, from the United States, the UK, Germany, the UAE, India, find an effective and successful pathway to getting this problem solved for good. So at high level, that's me.
Yeah, and Nate's talked a lot about this for years. And one of the things that you told me was my idea about what causes people to compulsively use porn was kind of wrong. So I just thought that it was like, okay, there's this like weird phenomenon where it's like these pixels on a screen. We didn't evolve for it. So it's like an evolutionary mismatch. And we just essentially like our brains are kind of like the insects that circle around bright lights at night. You know, because it's like they evolved to fly with the moon using it to orient. And then these bright lights are there at night, these artificial lights, and they're flying around like fucking retards. And that's kind of like how we are. It's like we see this porn, we're like, oh my God, so much fucking ass. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm winning. And then you just literally get sucked into a hole. That's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. So I thought it was okay. So you put in porn blockers, you get rid of all the access to porn, which doesn't really ultimately get rid of all the access. Then you just, go out a lot, meet a ton of girls, and then you get sexual satisfaction from the girls. And then you also, what I found too, is that when I have a date coming up, or if I'm going to like fuck my girlfriend, I'm like, I don't want to watch porn because then the sex is going to be less good. And so it was a combination of like, yeah, put on porn blockers, understand why porn is bad, and then like have a good dating life, which is part of it. But I think what you hinted at or what you told me was that the reasons why people use porn are much deeper reasons, and they're using it almost like a way to self-soothe. So I'm really curious why don't you elaborate on that? Feel free to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, man, there's so much here to unpack. I think one of them is that, you're hitting on this idea that porn is an evolutionary supernormal stimuli, which it absolutely is. It is in large part something that shoots straight to the base of your brainstem. Like, when you think about it in a biological sense, the only drive that you have that is more strong than your drive to reproduce is simply your drive to survive. It is the second most powerful drive that any human being experiences, and it is the drive which occupies the predominant bandwidth of your life. When people are in survival situations, that's brief. You spend the better part of your entire life working on increasing your odds of reproductive success, let's say. So this is an appeal to a part of the brainstem, which is arguably the most powerful or close to the most powerful part of who people are and what drives people's behavior. And so there is this evolutionary mismatch in the supernormal stimuli that kind of lies at the core of it, but it's wrapped up and entangled in all these other factors, which turn it into something that there's a lot of supernormal stimuli out there that not very many people get addicted to. Then there's pornography, which we're seeing is actually something that it's harder to find somebody who doesn't have a problem with it than to find somebody who does. And there's cool research actually that's showing that now well, it's cool in the sense that we have numbers to put to it, not cool in the sense that it's happening. But over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in self-reported addictive relationships to pornography increase from 11% among men to 63%. And that was over the course of about 4 years. So we're seeing this massive spike. And so like, what's going on? And the interesting thing is like when you pull on the thread of this problem, it starts in the evolutionary aspect. It's like you're seeing naked people. That's clearly something that is appealing to everybody's brain. but why is it becoming such a problem? You follow this thread and it goes through basically everything. If you follow it into a person's life, you find that people who develop an addictive relationship with pornography typically have a complex web of emotional problems, to put it at a high level, a system of broken connections within themselves that pornography emerges as the perfect solution for.
Yeah. And one thing that I realized pretty recently is that you could be the smartest person in the world, but inside we're all kind of like retarded 4-year-olds and like emotionally. Like we all have these emotional needs that we're trying to fulfill. And you're going to either fulfill them in a positive, empowering way, or you're going to fulfill them in like a negative, disempowering, or addictive way. And a lot of the actions that we do are almost all the actions we do are an attempt to meet one of our needs. And yeah, so what are some of the common needs that you feel like people in porn, people that are addicted to porn are trying to fulfill or soothe or whatever?
Yeah, so to start at a superficial level and work inwards, there is the simple fact that people do not understand what pornography actually is and what technology is that they're
What is it?
interacting with. We can get into that. That'll require a little bit more explanation, but they're ignorant about how their minds are being played by a highly addictive and novel technology, and they are not putting up any boundaries against this incredibly pollution filled digital environment that we live in. So that would be like superficial reason number one. You're ignorant and there's opportunity. Like, it's like, I don't know what this is. Oh, there's boobs. And then you're down the rabbit hole and then you're stuck. But then moving inward is like, we're living in a time where a complex web of social, cultural, and other factors are creating conditions where people are just generally not happy.
Yeah, and
People are
I say the same thing with doing dating stuff. So what you want to get into those factors now?
Yeah, so at a superficial level, it's like people are chronically bored. They have no sense of overarching meaning and purpose in their life. They have nothing to connect with that they value more than the temporary pleasure they get from self destructive, self sabotaging behavior. People are living with this chronic internal sense of like this refrigerator hum of discontent and negative emotion that they cannot figure out how to resolve. And pornography comes in as a way to temporarily resolve the short term discomfort, or sorry, the discomfort people are feeling in the short term. So people are trapped in these perpetual self sabotaging cycles of short term mood repair that they do not know how to escape from. So the emotional discontent and background stuff like that, people are depressed. One of the most common things that I see people totally ignore across the board, and I think this could go off into an offshoot of the problems with spiritual bypassing. Like, people are approaching a lot of these problems like, why do I feel so depressed? And they're looking up like stoicism quotes about how to change their mindset. Meanwhile, they're sleeping like 5 hours a night. Their diet is full of all this inflammatory crap.
Mm.
They don't exercise, and they don't realize that those three things they not only comprise probably like I would say this, they probably comprise about 70% of the emotional quality of your life. If you eat well, if you sleep well, and you have a healthy circadian rhythm, and you exercise, you will eliminate about 70% of the negative emotion you experience.
Well,
And so
I would add on to that and good social life, friends,
definitely,
family, romantic
yeah.
relationships. I think if you add that onto it, yeah, it'd be like, I don't know, what, 90, 95%.
For sure. Yeah, and that would definitely take up a big chunk of that remaining thing. But you have a lot of people who they're depressed and they're struggling with chronic physical health issues that they are totally ignorant they're experiencing. So people have high anxiety, they're tired and fatigued all the time. They don't have the energy to go out and actually meet people and work on meeting some of their legitimate needs. And so they're stuck in this pit of just feeling terrible. And pornography once again appears as like 3 clicks, I can feel better.
Mm.
So there's an emotional coping mechanism relationship that people have with pornography. And then there's a lot of stuff where it goes deeper into trauma. So by and large, I actually, this is so crazy because I started seeing this and now I'm keeping track of it and I'm putting numbers to all of it. Of all of the people that I've talked to over the last year, which at this point measures in, I would say, around like 160 people that I've had one-on-one conversations with, I have not met a single person who is addicted to pornography who came from a healthy family where there was healthy attunement between themselves and at least one of their parents. across the board, the most common thing that I hear among people who are struggling with pornography in a deeper way is that they grew up in a family where they just felt like they had to keep their shit to themselves. And one of the things that people also don't take into account is that when you're young and you have a developing mind, it is the connection that you have with your parents that teaches you how to process negative emotion.
Mm. And
If
one
you
of the things that you said is when they have to repress those emotions, it actually makes the emotions more severe, and it strengthens those emotions. So the emotions that they're trying to avoid the most don't get processed, and because they're avoiding them, they get worse. So this is like from ACT therapy. Like the first step of ACT therapy is accepting your emotions. So like people think like mindfulness, for example, you just have to be like super happy and present. No, you're present and you're tuned to your emotions, but the emotions don't have to be positive. In fact, it's very helpful to process those negative emotions, and you need to feel them to process them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that ties into another core factor which drives porn addiction, which is an identity of toxic shame. The low self-esteem, self-hatred, self-aversion, constant negative self-criticism, rejection of yourself and your emotions, that also creates this opportunity or this perfect sort of void for pornography to come in and help you relieve. Um, but yeah, the way that I describe things is like when I see people who struggle with pornography, they are stuck with a mind, a series of habits, and like a way of being in the world, which in which their only available response to any kind of challenge or negative emotion is one that is self-destructive, actually increases emotional distress, and takes them in the direction of shame, isolation, and disconnection.
This kind of reminds me of like a lot of people that have dating issues. They'll bring up a question or a topic that they think their problem is, and it almost is never their problem, right? And I think that's kind of like what porn is like. Oh man, I just keep watching porn, but that's not really the problem. The problem is you have these like you've been repressing emotions for like 20, 30 years, and you're using this as a way to self-soothe. So there's like this subconscious or unconscious like you said refrigerator hum of anxiety, depression that comes from a variety of sources, and they just don't know how to fucking regulate it.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say that this gets into some of the big mindset shifts that I see are extremely important for people to have if they're really serious about getting this problem solved.
Go off,
I'm
king.
going to go off king. and one of them is that everybody gets into recovery, and this is true for a lot of changes that people try to make in their life. But specifically with pornography, they just think I need to get pornography out of my life, and then my life will somehow be fine. And what you inevitably find as you get into recovery and you get serious about figuring out why you can't solve this problem is that you don't just need to quit porn, because pornography addiction and the life that you're living are the same thing. You actually need a new life altogether, because it is the life that you're a part of that is opening up a space for pornography to come in as the solution, which is another big, I would say that's the first big mindset shift for people to have, is that pornography, while it causes damage and has problems associated with it that are very real, the only reason that you keep returning to it is because it's doing something for you. It is actually showing up in your life as a solution to a deeper problem. It is not the problem itself. It is not the driver of the car. It is just the screaming passenger. And that is a big thing that people miss, is they just think that porn is the problem. And they keep attacking pornography with these really ineffective strategies while neglecting everything in their life that is messed up, that is actually creating the conditions for pornography to be a problem. And the way that I framework this is that another mindset shift to understand is that pornography addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder. No addiction is. You're not struggling with this because you have a deficiency of willpower and discipline. Funny enough, everybody that I've met who struggles with pornography can deploy their willpower and their discipline in other areas of their life to great success. So there's not a lack of willpower and discipline, but there's this mystery as to why it's not enough to solve this particular problem. And that's because there's no deficiency of willpower lying at the root. So no amount of throwing willpower at this problem is going to stop it or solve it. And conversely, what is addiction, or specifically what is pornography addiction? It is an intimacy disorder. It is a disorder and a disease of missing and broken connection throughout somebody's life. And the sort of categories that I walk people through is that there is the internal, so there's a series of broken connections within yourself. It is what you're like you were talking about, the self-rejection, the inability to sit with emotions, right? This belief that a lot of people have, that I had myself through my active addiction, that good people don't have bad feelings and bad people don't have or sorry, what is it? Good people don't have bad feelings and bad things don't happen to good people.
Mhm.
There is a broken understanding of what it means to just live a normal human life. And people do not understand that a lot of the emotions that they feel that are uncomfortable and negative are actually symptoms of health, not symptoms of dysfunction.
Mhm. And there's this quote, which is the deeper the pain, the more universal, something like this. So, like
Yeah.
the things that you feel that you think that you shouldn't be feeling, or that you shouldn't be feeling, they're very, very common. Like
Mhm.
everyone feels them at some point, and yeah, the way to process them is to process them, is to feel them, to sit with them, to understand them, to journal, and to kind of piece together parts of your past and realize that that's part of you. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The way
Oh,
that I
I
heard
wanted
that
I
was,
wanted to kind of punctuate what you said before. So you were saying like you think a lot of people think if they just get rid of the porn, then it's like, oh, everything's fixed. But you were kind of hinting at positive sobriety. And that's a term you used a lot, which
Mhm.
I like, which is it's kind of like you everyone's heard the thing about in the Vietnam War where those veterans or those Vietnam soldiers, they were using like heroin in Vietnam, and then came home and they came back to like a loving family and like a great social network, and like just everything kind of a good job, whatever. And they completely stopped using heroin because they didn't really need it anymore, because they solved their emotional problems, which was probably just like a lack of like peace and you know sex and other stuff. And yeah, I think a big part of recovering from addiction is, yeah, have parts of your life that are awesome. Like the other day, I literally had this realization. I'm like, my life is so fucking awesome. I was like, I get to like create videos, help people, coach, mentor, and then I get to go play fucking ultimate frisbee. And then I fucking get to fuck my hot girlfriend, and I get to hang out with my cool dog. It's like, I live in a place where in the winter it's like nice and warm. It's like there's so much to be grateful for, and my life's so fucking awesome. Like I don't really the thing for me is like, because I actually Nate personally helps me. So he puts Custodio on all my laptops. He has all the passwords. He sets up my screen time. It's like I pretty much 99.9% of all porn is like blocked, and that's from him like setting up these systems and stuff. And I recently got a new computer, and it's just been sitting here for like 4 days. And I checked. I was like, can I access like porn on this? And I could. And I was like, okay, turn this off. Boom. I'm gonna wait till Nate gets here. Porn is not a part of who I am and who I'm becoming, and that's just not what I want in my life. And I will make this distinction that, like, yeah, I have dealt with a lot of porn use, and I have also dealt with a lot of emotional issues. I had a fucking crazy adolescence that I don't wish on anyone. But like recently, I actually did a lot of introspection into this, or like processing of it, and I feel like I made a huge shift. And part of it was toward the end of ACT therapy, there's this thing called values based living, or like creating values that you live in accordance with. And like one of the things is written on my whiteboard right now. It says, "How can I become even better so I can give even more?" So there's people out there that need our help. And if I am struggling myself, or if I'm fucking up myself, it's going to decrease my ability to give back to other people. So that's my like kind of recurring question I ask myself: how can I become even better to give even more? It's not about me, and it never was. It's about giving back to the tribe, helping people, raising people up. Obviously, there's a boundary. I'm not going to like, take 50 homeless people and put them in my house, but I'm trying to help the people that I can, right? The audience that I have. So, yeah. The other thing you hinted at was the difference between root cause and a symptom.
Mhm.
So, like, this is very common in dating as well. It's like people think the problem is something else rather than what it actually is. But yeah, I'm gonna let you continue. I know where you left
I
off.
think you would ask me about positive sobriety
Yeah, yeah. Why don't
doing
you?
that. Yeah. So to kind of close the loop on that, because it'll get perfectly blend into this topic. The porn addiction is an intimacy disorder, and it's defined by an environment and a constellation of broken connections or missing connection throughout somebody's life. So there's internal, that's where shame, trauma, family of origin wounds, all that kind of stuff comes up. Relationship with self, um, non-integrated psychology, that's where all of that comes into play. But then it also goes out into the world, into somebody's relationships. So across the board with people who struggle with pornography, I universally see that they have a deficiency of effective dating and relationship skills, and they have a deficiency in intimacy skills. Meaning, and what is intimacy? Like there's a couple ways to kind of define this. There's one that people talk about in sex addiction and recovery groups to make it really simple, which is intimacy tells you what it is. Into me you see. Are you capable of communicating who you are, your personality, your emotional experience in such a way that other people see the truth of who you are? Because until that happens, you will never feel like the real you is being seen and known and loved by others. And that also runs in reverse. Until you can provide that environment and you can communicate with another person in a way that reveals the truth of who they are, so that you can be the one who is the source of that acceptance, seeing and loving and knowing, then you cannot experience meaningful, real, deep connection in your life. And people across the board lack those kind of skills. So there's a broken system of relationship and connection with friends, romantic partners. There's a massive skill deficiency as well, which obviously that's like your wheelhouse in terms of especially the external strategic elements of getting people to understand how to be successful in dating and relationships. But then there's a higher relationship, or I say deeper relationship of broken connections, which is with life itself. People lack, as you were just hitting on,
And with themselves.
and with themselves. Yeah, people lack any connection to a real sense of purpose and a transcendent sense of meaning in their life that can carry them through the inevitable tragic and painful experiences that are baked into the human experience. And we're living in a time where there's a lot of absurdity, and meaninglessness is the defining feature of being alive today. Like, we have all this stuff, yet everybody's miserable. We are being killed by comfort, and people have material success, or they're struggling to find material success, but they see other people having it. But we're still sitting with this question of, we have all this stuff, what's it for? And lacking that transcendent connection to a sense of meaning and purpose, you will constantly feel a deep sense of existential loneliness, fear, and a self centered and disconnected relationship with your life, out of which you will try to control things from a place of fear and insecurity that will always lead to negative self sabotaging outcomes and a plethora of negative emotion. Um, and so connecting people with that authentic sense of purpose is by far the most powerful thing. Like I kind of hit on earlier, that until something is more important to you and is more rewarding for you to be a part of than temporarily improving your mood through these strategies of short-term mood repair and self-sabotage like pornography or video games or whatever it is, you like, until you have that, those things will always be the most motivating thing in your environment. And this is where the positive sobriety thing comes in, where negative sobriety is what most people try to do when they're embarking on any pathway of transformation whatsoever. It's the first wrong move that everybody makes, which is, if I want to change something, I change by depriving myself of the thing I'm trying to quit, or of fighting against the thing I'm trying to change. That doesn't work. It never works. And especially when somebody's struggling with addiction, as we just kind of charted out, you have this whole environment and system of broken connections in your life that are creating massive amounts of negative emotion. And you think you're going to be successful by just removing the one thing that is providing you with relief. So you're going to remove the relief and leave yourself with all of the pain and think you're going to be successful. It's ridiculous that you will never. And this is a deeper thing as well, with the meaning in life aspect, that our culture generally lacks an understanding of how change happens. People do not understand how to change, and that's another thing we could get into. But the
So
positive.
basically, what I'm hearing is the main things that are going to get people out of pornography addiction and keep them out of it is creating an awesome life that they want to be a part of, having a sense of meaning and purpose in their life, and those are like the two main things. It sounds like.
Those are two by far the most powerful things. Yeah. So kind of outside in from a superficial or
Well, I wanted to say one other thing, and it's that I think what's powerful about this is that when you start resonating with empowering things, you naturally feel like a separation between you and the thing that was pulling you down. I think that's like one of the most important distinctions I found is that it's not just about like, setting up all the systems so you don't fall off track. It's like, why don't you start resonating internally with the person you are and the person you want to become? So that way you naturally separate and detach from the things that are holding you back, and you naturally gravitate toward the things that are, empowering you and making you live a great life. And that's the difference between uh, push and pull motivation, like extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So if you have that intrinsic motivation, like who's the person I want to become? I want to become a person who gives a lot, who shares with people, who has an abundant, dating life and abundant social life. I want to be someone that's super healthy, someone who's vibrant, who gives a lot of energy. And in order to be that, porn doesn't fit into that game plan. So it's not a part of who I am and who I want to become.
yeah, absolutely. If you hit on something that uh, is like a specific element of what it means to find a sense of purpose in life. So the way that I break it down with people is that every single one of us has an internal purpose and an external purpose, and the two go together. So external meaning and purpose would be, there's a really simple way to kind of test to see if you have this in your life. Is there something that you would want to exist even if you didn't?
Mm-hmm.
And do you spend a significant or a significant amount of your time every day or most days each week contributing to that thing in a positive way? That is external. The internal is where we get more spiritual and psychological, where the purpose that I feel as you were talking about is there's a version of me that I need to become. I am being drawn forward by some kind of inspiration or a sense of higher potential for who I could be, how I could contribute, the way that I could affect the world in a positive way that requires me to become a different version of myself, a higher version of myself. That is an internal purpose. And all of us, we have a sense of that, right? Like with dating is such a I think is such a powerful example because if you lack the skills to go up and start a conversation, to move an interaction forward in a way that is win-win for you and a girl that you're interested in, you can't set up a date, you can't create healthy relationships. What you are struggling with in a very deep sense is a core part of your psychology that is cripplingly underdeveloped, and you feel that pain. That constant sense of pain and insecurity is the psychological spiritual message that there is a part of you that needs to grow, or you in a spiritual sense, maybe not in a physical sense, but to die.
AustenSummers.com for it was a good setup.
Yeah. And so even with my clients, there's a fantastic book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover that I use as a framework that inside of every man, there are four core archetypes, which are the building blocks of your psychology. The king, which is, do you know how to lead? Do you have a vision, most importantly, that is positive, that you can lead others towards? That is that kind of higher purpose element. The magician, which is your ability to encounter the unknown or chaos and turn it into something positive. Can you go into pain, negative emotion, discomfort, and come back with something valuable to give others? Then there is King Warrior. There's the warrior, right? Have you integrated your capacity for aggression? Every single man, right? The way that our biology is wired for us to express aggression is primarily physically. If you have not contacted and integrated your capacity for aggression, you will be a doormat for other people. You can't say no. You're afraid of conflict. You're afraid of other men. It creates this massive amounts of problems for people psychologically. And then the other one that we're hitting on is the lover, which is, can you, or is your sexuality integrated into your personality and into your psychology in such a way that you can be effective in dating and relationships? Which is, even in a bigger sense, like, are you capable of passing on the torch of life and consciousness?
Mhm.
And if you do not have these four things, like inside of every person is an internal drive to what we would call actualize in Jungian psychology, these archetypes. And most people, like, we do not have pathways available to us that are helping people to make this transformation. And so people sit and struggle because they don't know how to actualize that sense of internal purpose.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point is you need to have something that you do that allows you to develop that. So what I've called game is like it's the gym for your personality and your dating life, right? It's like when you go out and you're gaming, you're talking to a bunch of girls, you're able to practice all those skill sets so you can incrementally increase them. And then, like you said, for the warrior, it's like, dude, as you were describing that, I was smiling because I was just thinking about the ultimate frisbee tournament I went to. And it's like, dude, I was getting some D's where like me and this guy are like shoulder to shoulder, like laying out to get the disc. And it's like, yeah, it teaches you how to be assertive. It teaches you like, no, when that, at least for me, when that disc goes up in the air, it's fucking yours, right? It's mine. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get it. I don't care if there's conflict or adversity or like there's some danger. That's the goal. That's what I'm getting at. So yeah, I think it's important to have like, and what were the other two, and what's like a pragmatic thing that you could do to cultivate them?
So the four are king, warrior, magician, lover. The king archetype is so one thing that's kind of important to notice that while we describe them as separate, they are interconnected, right? So as you improve your capacity to manifest the king, so to speak, you will also advance your lover archetype, generally speaking,
Leading.
right? So the king aspect really is, again, do I have the capacity to lead? Think like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. He is like probably the defining cultural symbol of the king, at least for in like pop culture of our generation for the last 30 years or so. Um, do you have the capacity to stand up for what's right, to understand and discern what is true, to cultivate a vision for the future and a path that moves forward in such a way that everybody around you is lifted up by it?
I have this video I'm gonna make soon. I'm gonna call it like fuck the daddy something. Was it? Whatever. Basically, it's like you first need to get good at managing yourself or leading yourself. If you're not good at leading yourself, no fucking girl is gonna want to go with you, right? You're like, if your life is in shambles, you can't even like lead yourself. No girl's gonna go with you, and if no girl is gonna go with you, no fucking guy is gonna follow you either. And then like at a certain level, like as you gain in proficiency in leading, you get more and more responsibility. And eventually you're like the daddy of an organization or the daddy of a country or the daddy of the world, you know? So it's like, yeah, it can be cultivated over time, but it first starts with leading yourself, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's an element of the king which is also, put it simply, do you have your shit together? Are you capable of creating healthy order and structure in the world and environment around you?
Get your shit,
Literally.
get
Yeah.
it together, put it in a ball, get your shit together.
uh, but yeah, I mean, if you do not have the ability to create positive order in the world around you, you have an underdeveloped king archetype in your psychology.
And what was the last one?
So king, warrior, magician, lover. The magician is really, I would say, purely spiritual. That is meditation, diving into, integrating like shadow work kind of thing. So meditation, shadow work, confronting your past and your trauma. Um, can you confront difficulty in your life, or do you run away from things that are scary? It is the magician would be like walk. I mean, to use like Jordan Peterson, be like walk into the darkest part of the forest that you least want to enter. That is where the magician emerges.
And I think it's important for people to know that like a spiritual work and inner game work, however you want to define it, is very individual. Some things that work for some people are like gangbusters, or for another person, just like not great at all. So you have to experiment, see what works with you for you. Try different forms of therapy. Try therapy in real life. You said you like group therapy and group coaching.
Yes, with respect to addiction specifically, it's never something that is going to be resolved in isolation. It's another thing talking about a system of broken connections. You're addicted because you lack connection.
And
So
especially with porn, you when you use porn, you feel like you want to like be alone. Like you just feel like you want to shelter yourself from everyone else, and that's precisely the literal worst thing for you to do, right?
yeah, addiction, the things that people should see as fuel for addiction is isolation, shame, and secrecy.
So like as soon as you bust a nut, you should just be going outside, shaking people's hands, meeting people, high five, and no.
I mean, honestly, maybe wash your hand first, but yeah.
Can I ask you? This is a question I've wondered for a while. Because there's a sex Reddit, and like people discuss certain things. Like, I remember some guy posted on there. He was like, "Yeah, I have erectile dysfunction. I'm only like 22," and I was like, "Oh, bro, you should like check out NoFap. Like, it'd probably be helpful for you, or just like find out like you quit porn." And I got banned from the sex subreddit for saying that potentially his compulsive porn use would be causing his erectile dysfunction. And it's the reason why it was banned because it's assumed in like the sex community that if you're telling people not to watch porn, it's because you're like some authoritarian Christian who like wants to ban porn in the world because of like some weird ethical system or something like this. When in reality, it's not that. It's that this is a destructive thing that literally causes people to like lose their boners, makes that fucks up their mental health, makes them more anxious and depressed, makes them more isolated, etc. And that's the reason. But can you go into that? I don't know if you've done much thinking about that, but that argument from them. I'm like, how are you that stupid? Like, how are you that like? It's like they're looking through like a pinhole when it's like there's a fucking like elephant in the room right there. It's like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's totally unsurprising. I think Reddit is a
Well,
manifestation
even
of
outside of
suicide
Reddit, I've
culture.
heard so many people describe it. They're like, "Oh no, don't shame porn. Porn's good. Masturbation and jerking off all the time to fucking hyper novel stimuli is super good for you."
Yeah, so
What?
I think this is a good segue into like when I was talking
Can I just say, I feel like most people should not have opinions. 90% of people, your opinions are just useless. Like I'm sorry. Never mind. You comment down below. I value your opinion.
But I think this is a good segue into the a conversation I started earlier a little bit about what in the world is pornography, because I think that people treat it as if it's something normal and natural, and then like I mentioned, they use it ignorantly, not understanding at all what it is that they are interacting with. They think it's naked bodies and pixels on a screen. That is not what pornography is. Something that's really important, right? Is pornography normal? Well, there's a lot of things that are normal that are not healthy. One, right? This is the naturalistic fallacy.
I
But
also like to differentiate between normal and common. Just because something's common doesn't
right,
make it normal. It's
exactly.
common for people to eat fucking Chick-fil-A that's like 85 fucking fucked up ingredients in it, but it's not normal. Your body did not evolve to eat that type of food.
Exactly. Yeah. And with respect to pornography, like most people don't understand the history that for all of human history up until about the 1970s, there was no such thing as pornography. There was erotic art that people created in various societies, but if you wanted to actually see people having sex, you basically had to be a participant in the act. There was no way to package an image or a video of two people engaging in a sexual act and mass distributing it across a
So
population.
it was just tough to crack a nut back then.
I mean,
You had to like use your imagination pretty
yeah,
much.
it was really old school tech, the old mind's eye. But yeah, up until the 1970s, there was no such thing as what we know today as pornography. And if you fast forward through time, you don't even get Playboy and Hustler until like, really the 19, I don't know when Playboy started. Hustler came a little bit afterwards, but you're talking like 1980s, 1990s. And it wasn't until 2004 that with the arrival of the internet that internet pornography became a thing, and then it didn't turn into what we now know as high-speed internet pornography until 2008. And so you are looking at a novel sexual technology that is basically a mass psychological experiment being done on an entire population without their consent that has been going on for less than 20 years.
And I think one of my favorite anecdotes from this is that the first people to experience like insane amounts of erectile dysfunction from porn were like software developers and coders who were like intimately connected. They're always getting like the fastest internet and like their brains are just blown, dude.
Yeah, so in the year 2000, the rates of erectile dysfunction among men under the age of 35 were 0%. By 2011, which is 3 years after the introduction of high speed internet pornography and the mass distribution of the iPhone, which was also a piece of technological innovation that enabled pornography to spread at the way that it did. 3 years after that, the rates of erectile dysfunction among men under 35 rose to 30%.
And it's crazy too, because like the internet used to be a thing that you like went to. It'd be like, oh shit, you have this computer in your house with the whole setup and the speakers, and it was like the family computer. And you go sit down there and be like, oh cool, let me use the family computer. Da, 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 da. So it's like really tough to bust a nut in your living room to that, when you got like all your family members there. Unless that's your thing. But yeah, but then like you said, iPhone, you can just go into the bathroom and like crank the hog.
Absolutely. So you now have,
Jerk the cooking,
dude, you have it. It's like on the go. You
Jack
have,
and the Kraken.
you have a highly addictive sexual technology, which it takes literally a few swipes of your thumb to access that you carry around with you in your pocket.
Mhm. Yeah, and willpower is gonna get you through that.
Right. Yeah. It's like the analogy that I use with some of my students is that, like, if you were imagine that you met somebody who was struggling with alcoholism and you were trying to help them get this problem solved. So you sat down with them and you started asking them some questions about their life, and you asked them, "Well, tell me about where you live." And they said, "Well, I live in a bar."
Yeah. I live in a bar and I carry a flask around in my pocket at all times.
Right. It's like, so how hard is it for you
And
to
I have to pull out the flask constantly.
It's like, would it be any surprise to you that this person struggles with alcoholism if they live in a bar? But we don't make that connection because the digital environment is something that we tend to treat as invisible, yet it's all around us. Every single day, people are now spending an average of like 6 to 8 hours a day on screens. You are living inside of a digital environment, yet we do not put boundaries in our digital environment the same way we would in our physical environment, because it doesn't come intuitively to us. Because, as you said, this is novel technology that we did not evolve to deal with. So we have to come up with a new set of solutions to this problem because it's unlike anything we've ever dealt with before.
I'm gonna prompt you. Act as a porn recovery coach and give me the scientific breakdown of what porn does to the brain, like the hyperfrontality, for example, and then give a practical example of what that looks like and how it plays out in people's lives.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, from a scientific perspective and a neuroscientific perspective, we see the same neurological changes inside of chronic porn users' brains as we do with people who are engaging with addictive substances of all kinds. So, the four things that to go through, one is called hypofrontality, which means that we see a decrease in gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain which is responsible for executive functioning. It is in I mean, it does many things, but one of the most important things that it does is, if you look at how the brain is wired, there's like a gas pedal that runs up from your primal brain, your limbic system, to your prefrontal cortex, and there's a brake pedal that runs down from your prefrontal cortex to your limbic system. If you do not have a strong prefrontal cortex, you are literally all gas, no brakes. You will constantly be subject to the whims of your primal desires with seemingly no ability to stop it. And that is not a moral failing or a character failing. This is a real neurological change that is measurable with the right instrument, obviously like an MRI or something, to look at what's happening
Yeah,
inside
and
of
if
your
your
brain.
executive function is bad, that means you can't focus very well. You can't strategically plan as well. Like it fucks you up with work. It fucks you up with just planning in your life. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so there's hypofrontality. Another one that we see is craving. So if you look inside of a porn addict's brain while they're not using porn, you will see that the reward circuitry in their brain is actually hyper activated,
Mm.
meaning they are craving pornography even when it's not present. And you do not see that same activation inside of the brains of people who don't struggle with pornography. And to bring this into like a practical sense, one of the defining features of struggling with a pornography addiction is that you are living in a world that is characterized by an obsession with sex and self. For somebody struggling with pornography, their life basically revolves around either
Pleasure and
watching
arousal.
pornography or trying to stop watching pornography. And their vision becomes restricted to me, my problems, how I can escape this, how I can get what I want. So you see that there's a deep link between obsession, which is what we see as craving, and well, yeah, there's a deep link between the experience of sexual obsession and rumination on self, and this perpetuation of addictive craving inside of the brain. Um, But yeah, so we have hypofrontality, we got craving. Another one is called hypersensitivity. So if you take somebody who has an addictive or has been using porn heavily for their entire life, and you show them something that is triggering of their urge to watch pornography. So, for example, if I took somebody who struggles with porn and I just showed them like an Instagram model in a bikini,
Mm,
the activation in their brain compared to somebody who doesn't have a pornography addiction is like off the charts.
mhm.
So not only do you struggle with pornography, but you have become incredibly vulnerable to re-engaging in that addictive behavior at exposure to triggers or cues that are basically like they do not impact other people.
Mhm.
And so that also creates this sense of like, I don't understand why I struggle with this when other people don't. It's like, well, dude, you have a brain now that is like, imagine taking your average person and then amplifying the desire to engage in this behavior by like 10, 20
And is
times.
that just because they've gone down that rabbit hole so many times that it's like, yeah, the way I like to think about this is like, imagine you're on a hillside and then there's like this path down to the sea, but there's no path yet, so it's just like this tall grass, and the first time you walk through it, it's actually kind of hard, and then the next time you're like, okay, I see the path through the grass, and you keep walking, and eventually that's like just a dirt path through this like 6 foot tall grass, and you know how to get there, and that's kind of what's happening to them, I guess.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you think about what is sex, as we talked about before. It is the most rewarding thing that your body can engage in. It is a signal to your genes that you have succeeded in the challenge of life and passed on your genes to the next generation. You get rewarded pretty heavily for doing that, it turns out, as most of us know. So, if sex is one of the most powerful biological drives, you're finding a way to simulate artificially being involved in a real sexual interaction, you get a lot of the same reward. Interestingly enough, though, we do see that there's something about masturbation and pornography that does not actually produce the same brain chemistry as when you are in a real sexual experience with a real person.
Yeah, and you feel the difference too.
For sure. It's way more dopamine intensive. It's a dopamine rush primarily that people get from it. And so you're giving your brain this reward. And there's a principle in neuroscience that everything that you do today that gives you a reward, you will crave tomorrow. That's how your brain is wired. The nucleus accumbens, which is the reward pathways in your brain, is very simple circuitry. If you do something that feels good, that gives reward, brain do more of that thing.
Mhm.
Brain want more good. It's like it is that simple.
Man, my good.
Brain want more good. Feel good now. And so the more that you engage with this kind of stuff, you are priming your brain for dependency on that thing in order to continue to experience a reward.
Mhm.
And to quickly rope this into was something we talked about earlier. The interesting thing is that you actually already see a lot of these brain changes in somebody who experienced childhood trauma. They already have hypofrontality. They already have a weakening and a susceptibility of certain parts of the brain that predispose them to be incredibly vulnerable to addiction. And that is part of the reason why there's such a powerful link between uh, it could be explicit big T capital trauma, like the loss of a parent or loved one. It can be little t trauma that occurs over time, like bullying or emotional neglect in a family system. So, all of those things predispose people to struggle with pornography or any addiction when they get exposed to it.
Cool. I'm gonna bring up the questions that people have. Luigi Salgado says, "What to replace porn with? Uh, which habit of dopamine and anxiety to combat loneliness?" I don't even know what that means,
Which
dude.
habit of dopamine and anxiety to combat loneliness?
He basically says what to replace porn with. I
Yeah,
guess that
so
comes from the idea of if you have a habit, you should replace it with something else.
yeah, yeah. So this gets back to I think we were talking about positive sobriety, and I didn't quite explain what it was. But positive sobriety is where you are engaged in such a meaningful, enriching, and genuinely satisfying and fulfilling life that there is no battle with pornography anymore of any kind. Your bandwidth in life is so filled with things that genuinely meet your emotional needs that you no longer think about watching pornography because it's a substandard thing for accomplishing the goal of actually meeting your needs, and you have more things available that are genuinely better but you also are no longer engaged in this battle of trying to stop watching pornography because all of your time is just filled doing good, cool things.
Mhm.
But the process of finding out what you have to replace pornography with is a deeply individual endeavor. What I enjoy and what I find meaningful is not what a lot of people are going to find enjoyable and meaningful. Um, but there's general things that we can hit on, right? So I would say by far the single most powerful things, interventions that somebody could make in their life right now, today, that would improve their ability to stay sober from pornography would be get your fucking sleep on track and start exercising hard. You have to be living a life where your body is physically healthy and living on a stable routine in order for your emotional life to become healthy and stable. If your life is chaos and suffering, your emotional life is going to be chaos and suffering. That would be like across the board general recommendation and good advice for everybody. Diet, sleep, and exercise. If those three things are not on point, you got work to do. Beyond that, it is your social connections. Are you going out and working on your dating? Do you have meaningful friendships in your life that you engage with on a regular basis? Beyond that, do you have any hobbies or meaningful goals or pursuits that you can engage in? Is there anything in your life that you find, again, would be very cool if it existed? Is there anything that you have that kind of relationship with? Are there any activities that, when you engage in them, give you that sense of life progression? Like your life is moving forward, or you're experiencing joy or something meaningful to you? Like for you, it's Ultimate Frisbee. I don't really like Ultimate Frisbee. I think I'm like neutral
That's
towards
why
it.
you're wrong.
I am,
Here's where you're wrong.
it's not even that I dislike it. I feel like the Switzerland of Ultimate Frisbee. I'm incredibly neutral towards it. But for me, I do a martial art called capoeira, which a lot of other people probably wouldn't like, but I love it. There's a lot of things about it that are incredibly meaningful to me. So this process of finding out like what can you fill your time with? Let me back up to make this a little bit more profound. This isn't just a problem to solve. This is literally the adventure of your life to discover who you are and what you like and what evokes a sense of meaning and purpose inside of you. That is the adventure of your life. And so I would encourage people to take this endeavor very seriously.
And I think one way they can take it even more seriously is if you see, here's the patterns that I've been following. Here's how my life is right now after doing this. Look at the severity of the problem that you have, and then think 5, 10 years from now, what is your life going to look like? How old are you going to be? How much regret are you going to have? How much is that regret going to make you feel like it's crushing your soul? How much, anxiety or depression do you feel on a daily basis? Is this driving you closer toward getting women into your life? Is this driving you closer to having great friendships? Or is it just driving you away from everything valuable in your life? And try to paint a vivid picture of what your life looks like if you keep living that way. And then conversely, think about your life if you get this problem handled, you cultivate an awesome life that you want to be a part of that, takes up your time, that's enjoyable, that you have a purpose and meaning, great social life. What does that alternative look like? And what are the values that you need to live by in order to make sure that that reality is the reality that you live?
Yeah, I know we talked about this before, and this is something that I also use inside my program, partially, is the Dickens method. It turns out, funny enough, that A Christmas Story by Charles Dickens is one of the most psychologically important books that's been written in the last couple hundred years, because the Christmas story charts out how to gain massive emotional leverage on your own psychology in order to allow change to happen. So you think of A Christmas Story, it's like, well, go back into the past, look at how you got here, how you treated people, the contents of your life over the last several years. If you're struggling with pornography addiction, or if you suck at dating and your dating life has been a wreck, and you look back over the last 10, 15 years of your life, what has your life been composed of? For a lot of people struggling with pornography, it's been like shame, loneliness, self hatred, struggling to get anything done because their focus sucks, no motivation, no meaningful goals or pursuits, chronic rejection because they're ashamed and insecure, and then that just like leaches out into all their social relationships. Like there's just this pile of pain.
Mhm.
And when you have that understanding, you come to the present, right? Well, where are you today? If you are honest with yourself, has anything gotten better in your life over the last couple of years, or has it stayed the same? Is the strategy that you're trying to use to create change in your life effective?
Yeah. Is it
Uh,
working?
is it working? And the truth of your life will reveal to you that in most cases it's not. And then you move that forward. So, right, if your strategy does not change and you chart this trajectory that you have just honestly discovered from connecting your past to your present and you draw that out into your future, what is that future? And is that a place that you want to go? And if you are being super honest with yourself and connecting with the truth of your situation, do you have any real evidence that something is going to change? With your best thinking, which you've always had by definition, and the best plan that you've always had, which is the only one you've ever had, because if you knew how to do better, you would be doing better by
Mhm.
definition. With the same things that got you into this mess, do you honestly think that you're going to get out of it? Is your life going to be better in 5 years by doubling down on the same strategy that you have proven to yourself is ineffective? And honestly, is that a place you want to be? Like, especially if you're struggling with pornography addiction, for most people, their lives are not like staying the same. It's not like struggling with an addiction of some kind is somehow like, yeah, it's like this bad habit that I do every once in a while. It's like, no, if I look back over the last couple years of my life, this has gotten worse.
Mhm.
Like maybe for a lot of people that I work with, it starts out with pornography, then it gets more extreme, then it moves on to other things. Like they start, the sexual behaviors can escalate off of pornography into their real life. Let's put it that way. And that trajectory of things getting worse and worse over time is the way things are going. Do you want to be sucked down that rabbit hole? And then conversely, it's also really important for people to begin to imagine a positive vision of their future that is real and tangible that they can use to compare to where their life will go if they don't change.
So now that everyone has hopefully everyone listening understands the severity of it. And if these people do want to change, what are some practical first steps that they can take in the short run and then also in the long run?
Get into community. That is by far the most important thing that people can do. And I think you can
If you were
attest
to
to
make
this.
like the 3 power laws or like the 5 power laws of porn addiction recovery, what would number one be like the most important step, and then two and three, four, five?
Number one by far would be getting connected to a community of other recovering porn addicts. I know that may sound kind of weird to a lot of people, but if you look at this principle in any other aspect of life, it immediately makes sense, right? Like I want to get better at dating. Why don't I connect with men who have solved this problem, who are better than me at this, who can give me mentorship, feedback, and advice?
And also like wingmen to go out with.
Right. And it's the same thing in pornography addiction recovery. If you connect with a group of guys who share your common goal, many of which have solved this problem, from whom you can receive connection, advice, and mentorship, and also it finally creates an environment where that deeper need for connection and for emotional intimacy with the group can finally occur, that is how you're going to be successful. One of the things that I've experienced in my life, and pretty much everybody that I've ever met experiences, is that it's very hard to internally self generate the power that we need to change. The ways that a lot of people change typically, like, people come onto your program, you can throw I mean, you know this, and I know this as well. You can throw information at people for their entire life and no change happens. You get them into an immersive experience, into a community where they can like receive by osmosis the energy and the motivation and the dynamic of the community. And it's like they become a different person.
Yeah. It's like the difference between reading a book on lifting and like going to like CrossFit or something, you know?
Yeah, and underneath that as well, this could be an entire podcast in and of itself, but it's a lot of people do not realize that addiction is not an individual event. Uh, an addiction and the environment in which it occurs are the same thing. So if you are living in an environment where your physical environment, your social environment, your digital environment, your cultural environment, your status environment, which that's a whole podcast in and of itself too, your spiritual environment are all not allowing you to meet your needs, that environment is the thing that is giving you permission and creating the space for the kind of person you're going to be able to be. So if you change your environment by connecting to a community, for example, then you automatically open up a new space of potential to literally be a different version of yourself. And so, again, isolation, secrecy, and shame are the things that drive addiction. If I ever meet somebody who has successfully recovered from legitimate addiction on their own, I'll let you know. I've never met anybody who's done it because addiction is a disease of isolation and obsessive self reliance. The more self reliant people are and the lower their willingness to connect with others for help, the more likely they are to have an addiction. And the more that they double down on that strategy, the stronger their addiction
And
gets.
dude, this I think like this is in every area of life. People that don't want to get mentors or don't want to get coaches, they rely on that narcissistic self-sufficiency bias. They're never like people you want to be like. They're always struggling in one way or another. It's like I have mentors in business. I had mentors in dating. I had mentors in fitness. It's and even in ultimate frisbee, dude. I have like there's some old professional players that teach me and stuff. It's like and I buy courses and I go through them. It's like if you want to be good in life, you need to get a coach, like just straight up. The difference is with I think what you and I do they did this a meta analysis where they found that people that get a coach, they learn 4 times faster or get 4 times more results. I think the difference between what you and I do is most of the people that don't get a coach that need a coach will never get results. And it sounds kind of sad, but that's the reality. Like there's people that are so stuck that unless a massive intervention happens, it's GG. That's the rest of your life. Have fun.
Yeah,
It's really sad, but that's the reality
absolutely.
because of what you said. It's an isolation, right? They're in isolation. They feel shame. Like shame, if you look at the what is that spirituality chart or whatever, the consciousness chart, shame is like the literal bottom.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and this also what I was talking about earlier, how modern people don't really understand how change happens. We also, not only that, these two things are integrated. People don't understand how their brains work. Like
so
people
wait, how do you?
fundamentally,
What is your process on how you think change happens? I have a thing where I call it these are the three ways you can change. One is epiphany. The second one is environment or habits, and the third is environment. And I always ask people pick what you think is the most important. And for me, I think it's environment. If you're in an environment like a social environment, it'd be like if you're out of shape and then you live with like 10 personal trainers that are like elite level lifters and nutritionists, you don't have a choice. Like you're just going to work out and you're going to be indoctrinated into their belief systems and to their ways of eating and to their ways of lifting and being. And like habits are good, but it takes a lot of willpower to cultivate that habit in the beginning. And then epiphany is great to like make you understand that you need to change. Like a lot of change happens in an instant where it's like, you're in a marriage for 10 years and you go, you know what? No more. Or you're like addicted to smoking crack like I was. And you're just like, you know what? No more.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that like, the ways that you
Dude,
listed
crack
out
is
that
so
change,
fucking good though,
dude,
bro.
it cracks. Yeah. Everything that you said in terms of how change happens, I definitely would agree with. I mean, so one thing I do want to get back to the power laws, so we make sure we finish that train
Yeah.
of thought. But to close this tangent, I think what's really important for people first is to understand how change doesn't happen, the ineffective strategies for creating change.
Do it by yourself.
But
You
more
don't
than
you don't
that,
need
like,
you don't need to read information. You got it.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of traps that people can fall into that keep them stuck. Theory junkie-itis is obviously one of them.
I want to guess some more. This is specifically with porn.
Some of them obviously applied
Oh,
to
that's
pornography, but
everything
are general.
that keeps people stuck. Unwilling to like look internally. They haven't shaped their values to match what they want out of life. Mm, man, let me think. Stuck in general. I think a lot of times people use the emotions as their escape. Like they're addicted to those negative emotions and they feel like if they get rid of them, then they'll lose that certainty that those emotions give them. But I'll let you finish.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are all good. So there's traps that we can talk about, but fundamentally, I think one of the most important things for people to begin to look inward at is what is it that you turn to when you need power to change in your life? And how do you discover this? Well, when's the last time that something very difficult or challenging happened to you? How did you respond? Did you shame yourself? Did you beat the shit out of yourself? Did you criticize yourself, compare yourself to others? basically just destroy yourself in some attempt to like beat yourself with a stick, hoping that if you experience enough pain, you're finally going to do different. Well, what does that tell you, right? In the worst moments of your life, how you respond immediately reveals the one thing that you think is the most powerful, like the highest power from which you can draw change from. So this was a really powerful insight that I had in my recovery, which, also with the community thing, mentorship and all that stuff, 100%. Like if you want to go fast, get a mentor. There's also free support resources for people that I actually require my clients to go to. So I require everybody who works with me inside my mentorship program to attend one 12-step meeting a week for inside of a sex addiction recovery program, of which like 85, 90% of people in attendance are there for pornography. So getting yourself into community, regardless of whether it's a paid mentor or something like a 12-step group, is essential. Um, but oh dang, I just got thrown off. What were we saying? That just totally threw me off. Sorry. Uh, Traps, motivations. Oh, that's right. So when I was working in my 12 steps, there's the second step of recovery. My sponsor at the time, who was like a mentor guiding you through the steps, he had me do this exercise, and he was like, I think that you believe in a higher power. You just need to find out what it is that you believe in. And this was about 3 or 4 months into recovery for me, where um, I just had a relapse, and I the night before I had prayed for like some kind of miracle to occur in my life. Didn't know what it was, but and at this time too, I didn't have like a religious understanding of God, but I was appealing to, I was practicing as if, right? If I could just pretend and give it a shot, a hypothesis, maybe I would discover whether there was something there or not for me. And so I prayed for a miracle. The next day I went to a coffee shop, and I was sitting there journaling about my relapse, and so much of it was just so much shame and anger and like, why can't you do better? Why can't you be better? Kind of thing. And there was one point where I wrote down this specific statement, and the statement was, how far down do I have to go before I'm going to stop? And it was like I had this lightning bolt moment inside of my head where something scrambled that sentence and revealed to me the belief that was underneath it,
Mhm.
which is, if only I could hurt badly enough, then I would stop.
Mhm.
And that showed me in that moment that I was living with this belief that I could just hurt myself into changing, that pain was going to be the thing that would get me to somehow become the fully actualized, like loving, compassionate, super capable, competent version of myself
Mhm.
that I wanted to become. My belief was that pain is the most powerful thing in the universe in order to create change. And the insanity of that thought just hit me in that moment where I was like, people struggle with addiction. I struggle with addiction because I was in pain. How in the world like, why do I believe that adding more pain onto the pile is somehow going to solve the problem? And so that exploration, I think everybody should do. And this is a very common trap, talking about how people don't
How would you
understand.
recommend them to work on that or to?
So an exercise, like when was the last time something seriously challenging happened in your life? Look at immediately how you responded to it.
Yeah, I also think like writing down exactly what your self-talk is what's being said in your own thoughts and what questions you're asking yourself. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times it's a question. People will be like, fuck, when am I actually going to be good enough? Or like, when am I going to hurt enough to finally stop? Like, and these things are just kind of replaying your subconscious. And like when you start writing them down, you could observe those thoughts and then you can do what's called defuse from those thoughts and those questions. So you start adding a little bit of space between them. So you can say like, I notice that I'm having the thought that, I need to feel more pain in order to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you start to identify that, like, okay, these are the thoughts that I had, this is how I responded, it'll start to reveal something that I really would like people to take uh as something that is not just superficial. Like, think about it. If the most challenging thing happens in your life, that is the moment when you need the greatest power to change. The thing that you turn to when you need the greatest power to change is the thing, by definition, you believe has the most power in the entire universe. By definition, if you knew of something that contained a greater and more effective power for you to change, you would be turning to it, but you
So
don't.
what is that for many people?
Shame. I think that is like uh the way one way to define the core spiritual and cultural struggle and dysfunction that we have is that people worship shame and they don't
So
realize that
how would you
they're
have people be more shameless or get over shame or improve?
what I've seen in a lot of people is that when you simply point that out, when you point out to them, like you believe that shame is the most powerful force in the universe to cause you to change, and that's why you keep turning to it. That realization in and of itself seems to have the power to kind of like disidentify, or like you were talking about, people from that belief. The next thing to ask yourself would be, well, what could I hypothesize would be a more effective energy to connect to in order for change to happen? And what you will inevitably find across the board is that the things that people discover have the most power to actually cause meaningful change is the truth and love. As cliche as that sounds, it is literally the truth that it is the experience of love, and not in like it can be in a relational kind of way, right? Like I feel, seen and affirmed by somebody, but that's a very small part of what I'm talking
You had
about.
a really good quote. You're like, uh, you can only really beat yourself up when you're down, but love is there when you're beaten down to lift you up, and love's there when you've accomplished something to reward you. So can you go into depth on that?
Yeah, so yeah, this is something that a core part of the trainings that I do with my clients on understanding patterns of self-sabotage. What is a pattern of self-sabotage? It is basically a chronic perpetual experience of skipping off the bottom. It's like something happens, crisis in my life. I feel terrible. I hate myself. Then the motivation that I get from feeling that much pain uh, allows me to get away from the circumstances that I was just in, but only for a period of time. And then all of a sudden, I find myself self sabotaging and I skip back off the bottom again. So if I look at your life and you struggle with self sabotage, what do I see? A pattern of you continually, subconsciously engineering circumstances in your life that give you permission to reconnect with shame, pain, self hatred, and all of that. Largely because, as I just mentioned, you probably are unconsciously believing that shame is your most effective power to create change in your life, or pain. So if you don't feel shame and pain, you have no power to change. Well, that's a problem because as a human being, your need for power to change is constant. And if you do not like, okay, so I'm hurting a lot. I made some changes in my life. Well, like 2, 3 weeks later, like I don't hurt so much. Like this isn't so bad anymore. And then all of a sudden it feels like shit, like things are actually okay. Well, now I don't feel like doing anything anymore because I lost my source of power and motivation. So you will only be able to feel motivated. You will only connect with the power that shame and pain can give you when your life is horrible. But love, conversely, if you start turning to that as a power to change, is always available. Whether you are in the lowest lows of your life or the highest highs, love is like a tractor beam that is always calling you higher and always wants more for you, always wants better for you, always wants what is genuinely good for you. So when you start to turn towards love and the truth as a power to change, all of a sudden you connect with something that is infinite in both its capacity and its availability. There is no limit or like circumstances in your life in which love is inaccessible.
Yeah, the only one I would add on to love and truth would be gratitude, which is like I think because of the modern era, we have so many you're comparing yourself constantly to people online, whether you consciously or unconsciously do that. It's just like it's just happening, right? And if you have shame for yourself and or maybe what you look like or your situation in life, if you flip to gratitude and you feel like, holy shit, like I have four limbs right now. Like I can walk, I can run. I'm in a country where the air is like clean. Like there's so much that we take for granted that if you start like listing out everything that you should be grateful for, it is like insane. Like the odds of you being born as a human are like infinitesimally small. Like we have the capacity to have like the best life possible. We also have the capacity to make it like the worst life possible. It's about how you was it interpolate or you interact with life
Yeah.
and your interpretation of the events in your life. So yeah, I think love, truth, gratitude are all good places to start.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and this is I have a specific training in my course called the happiness equation that goes over this idea that again, it's like these systems of beliefs that people don't realize that are operating and driving their life. For a lot of people, they have this idea that happiness is about getting what you want. They don't realize that the idea that getting what I want will make me happy, that's not a recipe for happiness. That is the equation for the hedonic treadmill that actually makes you more miserable over time. In conversely to that, gratitude is the magic elixir that makes what you have enough.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of things that people don't realize is that gratitude is the thing that runs the hedonic treadmill in reverse. And if you ride the hedonic treadmill for long enough, you actually end up with a psychology in which the only way you can feel positive emotion is by something getting better in your life. And that obviously has finite returns, right? You can go to all the five-star restaurants, you can get to a point where like maybe your dating success is just totally off the charts, and that will just become your new normal.
Mhm.
At which point, the availability of things to become better will actually disappear, in which case you're just a miserable person.
Yep.
Yeah.
The anecdote I had is this Grant Cardone gets on like 120-foot yacht with his wife. That he just bought this yacht. He steps on it with his wife and he looks at his wife, he goes, too small. It's like, what the fuck, bro?
Yeah.
Oh man.
But the other aspects of power to change, I think fundamentally involves community.
Mhm.
This is something that I kind of hit on a little bit earlier, and then there's still the power law thing to return to, but what I was saying, people don't fundamentally understand what being a human being is. We don't understand how our minds work, who we are, and a lot of this I know you know because of your research into like evolutionary sciences and psychology and stuff like that. Human beings are not of like we have not evolved to be in isolation, and that's not just like oh it's super uncomfortable to be alone. It's like you fundamentally do not understand what a human being is if you think a human being can function in isolation. And it's interesting that in cognitive science, we actually are gathering incredibly interesting scientific data to prove that this is true. So the leading theory of cognitive science is called 4E cognitive science, like letter E. And the four E's stand for embodied, meaning that cognition, which is you could think of that as like how do I process emotions in the events of my life, is embodied, meaning cognition is something that doesn't happen like in the brain. It is a mind body process, right? That's something we know. If you go and you work out, you have a fantastic workout when you're kind of in a bad mood, you can literally work through emotions through physical movement. Everybody has experienced that, although they may not, recognize that. The other one is embedded. Cognition happens inside of a context, your environment, right? Your environment determines how well your brain is going to work and what things your brain is going to be able to do. Another one is it's enacted, right? You can't just consume theory. You have to act it out in the world in order for you to change. But the next one is that it's extended. And that is that cognition does not. uh, that's a. Anyway.
All right, go on.
Go on. But cognition is it's extended, meaning that your ability to process life is dependent on you being connected to a network of other brains and other nervous systems. Literally, you cannot effectively process your life and your emotions in isolation.
Mhm.
The human being is a network organism. We have evolved to be in connection with tribe and community and other human beings, and in the absence of that, we just suffer. So one of the things that an idea that I kind of stumbled across, I don't know if people have ever heard of this before. There's something called a superorganism. So to think about this, if you put a single ant on a table, what does it do? It just like kind of wanders around. It doesn't do anything very sophisticated. It like squirts some weird juices and like follows weird scents and tries to find food. If I put 1,000 ants on this table or 10,000 ants, what happens? This really, really complex intelligent behavior suddenly emerges because 1,000 ants together actually becomes a super organism. All of them together now allow the emergence of a sophisticated behavior or property that you can never get out of a single ant alone. So when I talk about like you cannot cure addiction in isolation, I firmly believe that the psychological immune system that people are looking for is an emergent property of community.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, if you want to get like wisdom tradition about it, this is actually a very deeply spiritual and religious idea. There's a verse in the Gospels where Christ says, "Where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst." Kind of paraphrasing that a little bit. There's this very strong injunction, right? What is Christ? Christ is that which redeems, saves, right? It's sort of like you think about Christ symbolically as a like cosmic immune system in some way. It tells you that it is only in connection with two or more who are gathered around that common purpose that this experience emerges. And so people who've been struggling in isolation fundamentally do not realize how much power to change they are disconnected from living inside of this mindset of toxic self-reliance.
I'm just imagining you telling your future girlfriend, like, we need to have more threesomes and foursomes and orgies because there's an emergent phenomenon that comes out when more are gathered. We create this super orgasm when we're all together. But I think this is a good place to wrap it on Jesus Christ. Amen. But yeah, tell us a bit about your mentorship program.
Yeah, so mentorship, one thing really quick that we started this thread, I want to close it off. The power laws of addiction recovery. One is community. I would say, how to wrap this up simply. Um, Environment change, community, understanding that addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder, and working an actual program of recovery. Uh, One of the most common traps I see people fall into is that they think that they judge themselves by their intentions and not by their actions. Like every person who shows up at the start of a 100-meter dash has the same intention, and that's to win the race. Clearly, not everybody wins the race. Your intention is not what's going to decide whether you succeed or not. It's whether you actually do the things.
Mhm.
But another one would be so like that internal, then the connection pieces. This is more than three. Fix the internal connections, get into community, work on fixing the connections with other people, improve your dating skills, work with Austen, shameless plug, and then the last one would be work on connecting with a higher sense of purpose. As your life becomes more connected, your desire to watch pornography will naturally fall away. So the mentorship program that I run, it is a 6 month program. It's a group mentorship program where I take people through what I believe to this day. I just have not seen another one out there is the only program for porn addiction recovery that is truly holistic and comprehensive. It's a 6 month program that will take you through this process of getting porn out of your life, helping you to heal the internal roots of the problem, helping you to heal the social connections that are broken, improving your dating skills and relationships. So, another small thing for people is maybe not know this behind the scenes for about the last year and a half, I've been inner game inside of your program. I took a month-long immersion with Austin back in 2021 when he was doing those in Miami. Totally changed my life, and that's how we got connected and became friends. And um, I've since then used a lot of what I've learned from Austin in combination with the sort of internal stuff that I'm good at to help people with the internal inner game kind of stuff. So that's a huge part of my program as well. It'll be like the inner game, working on cultivating your capacity for healthy intimacy and relationships. And then the final part is that higher purpose, connecting people with a real and tangible sense of meaning and connection and purpose in their lives that transcends the momentary, transient circumstances. And then lastly, connecting people with the knowledge of how do you maintain this transformation moving forward.
Mhm. Yeah, and I recommend everyone go down to the link in the description below. Check out Nate's YouTube channel. Really good shit on there. I'm actually maybe I'll just plug a playlist of yours because I like the sequential viewing of it. It's really really good. And then also on so what's your YouTube? What's your Instagram?
Both at Recover with Nate, all lowercase, no spaces.
Mhm. And anything you want to leave the viewers with?
I would leave people just with a tremendous amount of encouragement that this is one of the most common and shame laced problems that people struggle with. It's kind of funny. Like you see Andrew Tate, or he came, he's like, "Why can't you stop, masturbating, jacking off?" your head is connected to your arm. Like there's a crazy amount of shame that we feel and a huge cultural and societal expectation that you should just be able to solve this problem on your own, or that this is not really a big deal at all. Yet you watch people like losing their lives and they haven't, had a successful relationship maybe ever, or they ruin a relationship because of this, or they have severe ED. It's like this causes very serious problems for people. People lose their jobs. I have clients I've worked with who have faced legal consequences because of how bad this problem gets. This is probably the most common problem among men in our generation is their struggle with pornography. So I would encourage people to, one, understand that you are not alone if you struggle with this. This is like the most common thing, as you said earlier. The more personal the issue, the more universal the issue. But the other thing is that recovery is actually possible. Like I work with people, and this is part of my experience, who just struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle. They try, and they just fall on their face hundreds or
Yeah, I
thousands
saw
of
one guy
times.
is like 15 years addicted, and then he's 6 months free now.
Right. Yeah. So working with all these people, and again, this is part of my experience where you try this strategy to get this problem solved for so long and it's ineffective that you tend to give up that there's just any hope at all. And so my message for people would be there is a pathway of recovery that works, and you are worth recovering. I truly and firmly believe in the value that everybody's life has. And the greatest tragedy would be for a false belief in your stuckness to prevent your gifts and the things that you could give to the world to fail to come into being. I truly believe that if people knew their own worth and their own value, that would immediately relieve them a lot of shame. But I want people to know that recovery is possible and they are worth recovering.
Mhm. Awesome, guys. Go check out Nate's channel. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Do you want to take your game from this?
What are you into? Nothing?
To this?
I'm gonna molest you right now. There's no way you're escaping me. Why are you so good?
While you may understand my transformation, you may not know that I've taught over 1,000 people all over the world in person to transform using the same framework. And I've distilled everything I've learned into this one course. Most courses only give you a small portion of what you need to get the results that you're looking for, such as getting over approach anxiety or learning how to text. While they may go deep on one subject, you miss out on all the other essential aspects of learning game. And lastly, they only cover theory. No one actually provides guys with the exercises they need to transform theory into skills through practice. This problem in our industry led us to create Game Transformation, the fastest sequential process for learning game ever. What if there was just one course that gave you 100% of what you need in chronological order with lifetime support from a helpful community and an experienced mentor? Throughout this program, you'll learn every essential aspect of dating, even if you're a complete beginner. In Game Transformation, you progress through 5 main stages. Phase 1, desensitization. We help you destroy approach anxiety so you can relax and approach anyone, anytime, anywhere. Phase 2, vibe. This is where we give you the tools to charismatically express yourself and make those conversations engaging. Phase 3, sexualization. This is where you flip a switch in women's brains so they view you as a sexual man and not a friend. Phase 4, strategy. This is where your results start to skyrocket.
There was even one night where we pulled, left, went back out, pulled again.
You're having fun sexual interactions where girls are gazing into your eyes, they're desperate to see what's next, and this is where we show you how to lead that interaction home. Phase 5 is naturalization. You game on autopilot and you date the women you truly adore. Not only that, but you're gonna go over 20 bonuses, including the DM Destroyer, how to unleash the floodgates and get hundreds of girls in your DMs within hours, banned videos too spicy for YouTube, over 50 interviews with top coaches and elite players, a secret app to automate your messaging using my optimized lines, over 40 full-length infields, and so much more. But what do other coaches think about the program? What do you think about that framework?
My story follows a very, very similar, if not identical progression. So you've done an awesome job.
It's very similar to my personal journey.
Man, I'm definitely resonate with everything you're saying. I really feel that it's actually that's a process.
You'll also see students just like you get results with the game transformation framework.
When I talked to women in person, I felt like my mind went completely blank. I didn't know what to say. I purchased multiple programs from pretty well-known individuals in the dating niche. I honestly believe this is the ultimate course. I'm starting to feel really confident when talking to women in person. I'm going on multiple dates and more quality dates as well.
All the answers are right here. Like, they're right here in this course. It's like so comprehensive.
If you're undecided, man, I would say take the fucking leap of faith. You're gonna have a lot of fun.
So if this sounds like the program you've been looking for, then click the link below and join now. Here's to your transformation.